Welcome back to the Reality Based Podcast. I'm very excited to announce today's guest in Made by Jim Bob. Jim Bob has one of my favorite YouTube channels. I'm regularly in his live streams where he debates with atheists and also engages in other forms of political and cultural commentary. But what Jim Bob is probably most known for is his artwork and his creation of memes. And in this episode, we're going to be talking a lot about how memes, images, and icons can really affect culture, especially in relation to the 2024 election and so much more. This was a fantastic conversation. So if you guys are listening on YouTube, then make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And you can also find the Reality Based Podcast on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube Music. So without further ado, I give you Jim Bob. Okay, Jim Bob, thank you so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, dude.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Now, the first time we ever met, I guess you can say met these days because online you sort of make friends online, was us having a back and forth about libertarianism and if whether or not libertarians are useful. It was kind of, I think you maybe came into it thinking that I was a libertarian, but not really a libertarian after all. So it was more about like the utility of it all. And we've had a few good exchanges since then when we're doing the hangout streams and all that sort of stuff. I also follow you on Instagram and you're constantly posting very funny memes, which I love. So just for the audience, for those of the guys who haven't come across your work yet, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
All right, yeah. My moniker is Made by Jim Bob. I'm a satirical cartoonist. I'm a weekly contributor at the Washington Examiner, and I've had multiple Instagram accounts basically canceled at this point, but that's now a badge on my shoulder, isn't it? And so, yeah, I run Made by Jim Bob, the Instagram account, and I also do a YouTube show, Made by Jim Bob, at YouTube, where I talk about culture, I talk about technology, theology, some politics, and things like this. And it's just a fun, engaging way to look at some of these issues in humanity in the past, in the future, and try to engage with them in a really fun way.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really enjoyed about our first ever time that we chatted, which really got me thinking, was when we were talking about the idea of propaganda. Because I think the word propaganda has a negative connotation generally. People are sort of projecting their ideas and their ideology, and it's like brainwashing people in a sense. However, how it made me really think the notion completely was when you were talking about the idea of positive propaganda and actually filling society with ideas about the nuclear family and ideas about virtue, basically. So one of the things that you do is probably the thing that you're most known for is your memes and your satire. So tell me why you do that and why it's an effective tool.
Well, I think I do it because I just naturally was drawn to it. From my view, I was given a gift of some level of discernment and able to, the ability to basically filter down more complex ideas to, sometimes a maybe overly reductive take, but hyperbolic take. But the reason I do it is because it's so effective in piercing through all the noise. I know, we all enjoy long form now. I'm glad that that long form podcasting and talking about things exists. I consume a lot of it. But as far as getting something across quickly, in the time frame that it's relevant and in an effective way where it actually delivers the blow, or the affirmative. There's no better, I still don't think there's a better method or medium than memes, aside from potentially stand-up comedy, which needs its own revitalization, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had this back and forth with Konstantin Kisin from Trigonometry podcast about woke comedy, because my theory on woke comedy is that it actually doesn't really exist, because the idea of comedy in itself is to push the boundaries and to go outside and explore the outer regions of what we would consider culturally appropriate or within polite society. But woke comedy is just inherently restrictive, and it doesn't actually allow you to go outside. It says stay in your lane and don't move.
Yeah, it's actually I've talked about this distinction where comedy itself, if we're talking about stand-up comedy, this applies to entertainment as a whole, shows and movies. What we call woke is really just activism. So we saw education take an activist turn, and now we're seeing entertainment take an activist turn, and we're in the middle of it. And now comedy, maybe the last standing wall of humor, And real, true inclusivity, the good kind of inclusivity, is humor based. Basically, they've made it activist based. So everyone, a comedian is to tell a joke and make everyone in the room feel like they're all part of one humanity. Everybody's a target, and now it's become an activist approach. And now people say you're not allowed to tell jokes. I think it's worse than that, because in my view, the joke is after the premise. I think they're basically committing premicide. I call it, is that they won't even allow you to say the basic premise. And in comedy, if you don't know the format in the audience, the premise is this truth statement that everybody almost nearly universally agrees with. Like, so a hacky comedian would say, "How about airports? They suck," right? This is not supposed to be the controversial position. It's supposed to be the truth claim about the category, and then the jokes come. Well, what we're seeing now in this activist era of comedy and entertainment is that you're not even allowed to say the true premise. Maybe there's a generalized position on ethnicity and race and culture that you could make, right? We're no longer kind of permitted. Now, I think that's turning. That's the good news. I think that's turning. I think the comedians are going to kind of circle the wagons again and go, okay, let's get back to being able to say true things that upset people. Because you can't do comedy, you can't even do the work I do, which is sort of a microcosm of comedy in memeing, without the premise. You need the premise. If you don't allow a premise, I mean, nobody's going to laugh anyway, because you can't even get them aligned with a single truth.
Yeah. And one of the ways in which we're seeing at the moment the meme game really fire up is obviously the US election. We've got Kamala Harris, who's just come out of absolutely nowhere from totally so unpopular. Like, people do not like her. And then all of a sudden they make a few TikTok videos of her dancing to some a TikTok song or whatever. And she's so popular. But it's frustrating, but it just goes to show that in this day and age, when mass media is being consumed so widely, that it's actually very important to have memes and to be able to sort of engage where the culture is. And the Republicans seem to be way behind with this, because Trump is like a golden opportunity to get lots of memes, but they're just not doing it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think from both sides, people have been sort of beaten down and disenfranchised, if you will, or just separate from the political arena, because it's such a clown show on either side of it now. So it makes sense that, the way in which they're going to participate, if at all, is going to be mimetic. It's going to be culturally. It's going to be at the, unfortunately, it's going to be very superficial, like watching WWE. So they're participating in sort of a reality TV show where they are the viewer, but they're also participants. And like you said, what's happening now is the only way for them to participate is through memes. But this is fascinating, is that we look at memes as these single units of cultural information that are transmitted through our phones, and we think of them as pictures or short animations or whatnot, or even a word. But what's fascinating now is that these political caricatures, Trump or Kamala Harris or anyone else, they become memes themselves. Not just we make memes of them. It's in their interest to become a meme, that they embody a meme, which is slightly different than what we're used to, which is, oh, they're a person, they're this entity, there's a candidate, there's someone out there with a name, and then we make memes about them. Well, now it's collapsing into one thing. That's my experience, is that it's almost in their best interest for Kamala Harris to be a cackling meme, that she purposefully becomes the cackling meme.
Interesting.
And this is wild, because, now we've blurred the line between entertainment and politics. I think we're pretty much merged the two indefinitely. But now you're seeing the merging of memes and people, and then people become the meme, like the Hawk Tuah, bullshit. You become the meme. The meme makes who you are, and then you lean into the meme, and then it's indistinguishable. I think this is fascinating, and I don't think it's ever really occurred before at this level because of the technology.
Right. Well, I mean, just to go to a deeper level, when we're talking about memes, and I think generally what people think when they think memes is the photos and that they make you laugh. But then you've also got Richard Dawkins's meme theory, obviously different. Yep. And then what we're talking about here with people that become memes. So what is a meme? I guess my question is.
I would say I would even take a Richard Dawkinsy approach, at least accept his definition, while rejecting everything else he says. That what does he say? A meme is a genetic a unit of information that's transferred in the biology. Whatever he says, there's some technological version of that I'd accept, which is a meme is a unit of cultural information that's transmitted through some medium. And that could be a single word that means something. That could be the meme or caricature of a person, a personality that's captured and transmitted through the medium. And so it's a lot, for American culture especially, it's a lot, memes end up reducing to sort of trending pop culture hot topics, and then they kind of fizzle out, and then you need a new influx of memes. So, if we look at it as a unit of cultural information that's transmitted mind to mind through some medium, I don't actually know what wouldn't be a meme from that perspective. Because if you go back, we didn't have the term. There's a lot of memes. We could say that religions are transferred through mimetically, and practices themselves could become memes in themselves. So it's kind of generalized, but when we point to a meme now, of course, you and I if there were two things on a table, and one was like a beautiful picture from some classical painter, and the other was like some shit post, and you asked Jake or me which one's the meme, obviously we would lean toward the latter. But more generally, I think we would have to include the former as well, if we're being rigorous, that a lot of things are just memes themselves, that we're in that age because everything is a much smaller bit of information that we're rapidly engaging with constantly. So I really don't know right now, through this phone, anything that comes through this phone, long-term, short form, I don't know how it could not be a meme.
Interesting. And it's interesting to think about it and the way that it evolves and the way that we interact with it these days when you think about where it might lead us in the future. Because you made the point before, which is so accurate, that we've now blurred the line between entertainment and politics. And like the whole culture war and the whole political arena is basically a clown show now. There's not really any order to it. So, and also it becomes a lot more low IQ as we go on. And as people get more and more TikTok brain, and as social media becomes much more influential, you have to eventually appeal to the lowest common denominator, because you're not really appealing to the older person who is just feeding the information to their children vote the way that they voted. No, you have to appeal to the individual voter these days. So do you see this getting more and more intense, this sort of meme war?
Yeah, I actually see it as it's pretty detrimental to Western civilization, in that if civilization is built on traditions, in this case family, and that I would extend that from my view, family is an extension of church. Whatever the tradition is, forget the debate of which tradition is correct. We accept that a society, a civilization is built with families, and the family has traditions that they hold on to, and that would give us the cohesion, whether we're talking about Japan or another country. And so what I think you described, Jake, there is that now the superficial WWE style engagement with politics and the world through our phone is making everybody kind of dumber. It's like this idiocracy. But the thing is, the idiocracy is predicted, but to replace tradition with that idiocracy is that's the thing that's alarming, that I think people are kind of waking up to, that, okay, if we all just appeal to the masses and the brain dead TikTok mind, right? If that becomes the tradition of the West, as opposed to what it was before, that's the new tradition. So we're always in this battle of tradition. So there's always this attempt to replace the current tradition with something else. Now, it should be horrifying whether you're on the right, center, or left. It should be horrifying to everybody if you said, should we replace existing traditions with TikTok, superficial, fast-paced takes? And that's all we do. You just become these sort of like automated response machines to trending culture. And I assume you felt this before, Jake.
Oh, yeah.
I felt at points that I just wanted to disengage, because I felt like I'm on this like this automated path where something comes down the pipeline. Now I got to give my response. Jake, what's your take? And we're in this like feedback loop, right? I know you feel this, and you and I are in this weird position where we're trying to battle some aspect of this while participating in it, right? And I wouldn't call it a full hypocrisy, but it's some weird tension. It's a paradox of sorts that I think a lot of people feel, whether they're content creators or not. You're basically going, is this it? Is this the new American culture? Is this the new culture of the world? Forget America. I mean, technology is invading everywhere. It can't not invade. And so this is everything you just described is basically a symptom or a feature of the technology itself. So I bring this up in my stream a lot, like how much we use technology, how do we use it in a way that's fruitful, and then what's the limit? And I really don't have an answer to that question, like where we become part of this problem, you know?
Yeah.
And how are we to propose a solution while being on the mechanism that we're pointing out might be the problem, right? It's a weird position to be in.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I feel that all the time. I think one of the things that I have to grapple with myself as like a content creator, as you'd know, is am I doing something that's actually inherently positive and that's bringing value to people? And obviously there are a lot of forms of content that are just inherently inherently not valuable, you know?
Right.
But I think that if you do have something that you're guided by, some sort of a North Star, then it makes you, then you can maybe, I guess, justify it to yourself a little bit better, the fact that you're constantly engaged with this. And this is what I've struggled with a little bit myself, is that I didn't really understand my own worldview for a very long time. But I'd say over the past year or so, I've begun to understand like objectivity a lot better. And actually through speaking with you and through speaking with Andrew a lot, it's helped me to sort of carve out my worldview a lot more. So I do believe that if you do have an end goal in mind, or at least something that you're trying to contribute to that you know is inherently positive and that you can use your reason and you can back it up through conversation and through debate, then it can be a positive thing. But you're very right in the sense that we're engaging with this technology and this sort of culture war that we don't really know if it's inherently positive because we haven't tested it out. Like we don't have 60, 70 years of data as to tell us where this goes or where this leads. But I mean, one thing I do want to say though, if I could slightly pivot here, it's that I've never seen a worse indictment of democracy than this current election that we are seeing, because the issues at hand are so outrageous and so absurd that it almost makes you think, like, what are we doing here? We're arguing over whether women should be able to kill their babies. That's obviously the biggest one every single time.
Right.
Yeah. Another big one is who can TikTok the best, who dances the best on TikTok, which of the performing clowns sort of dances the best. And it's just absurd. We're arguing if men should be able to bash women's skulls in boxing, and anyone who's ever stepped foot into a boxing gym knows that if there's any doubt whatsoever, you don't, because you can kill somebody. Like obviously not. And these culture wars are so ridiculous, but there's such a big part of the population that's totally captured by these ideas that you should be able to do these things. And if there's such a big section of the population that's captured, then they have to pander to those people. And what is this democracy thing that we are doing here?
Yeah, well, I think democracy itself in most forms is total garbage. So, I mean, straight off the bat, this urge to protect the thing called democracy, even in America, you'd get a bunch of right-wingers saying, it's not a democracy, it's a representative republic, it's a constitutional republic. Well, regardless of what you want to call it, what we have in the West, at least in the U.S., is this system that says everybody has an opinion that's valuable. And this is actually not true. We can demonstrate that there are people who have views, who have positions in their life where they're not giving a valid view of the world. I mean, you've seen it with Andrew. I mean, one of the greatest things that you're seeing when he goes on the whatever podcast is you're getting a sample set of the mass, whether it's male or female, of what the common mindset is, what the common worldview is, and this constant view of liberation, whether it's woke left liberation, feminist liberation, or on the right side, which I critique a lot and get a lot of shit for it, is is this assumption of, well, classical liberalism, like Ben Shapiro would be like, well, our liberals are the good liberals, like we have the good trans people because they're about small government. And it's like, this isn't good. This isn't a good take either. It basically reduces to liberty above all things. And if you take that position from the right or the left, you can't really be surprised at what you just pointed out as far as, well, now what's the mechanism for our governance? It's basically American Idol voting, right? And it's voting based on all of your preferences. It's not voting based on some deeper deontological position, a theological position. It's a vote based on what your preferences are. And then on the right, you're largely seeing a representation of people who prefer freedom, but it looked like this, not blue hair freedom, or blue hair freedom, but less government, and that's good, or do what you want, just don't take my stuff, this kind of libertarian impulse. And then on the left, they're obviously promoting way more aggressive things. Now, this is why I think it's a failure. I think the whole concept of democracy, that everybody's opinion somehow matters and we have to somehow filter it through this system somehow, I think is flawed. Even the voting system, I fundamentally at this point don't believe that the dialectic they're selling is true, which is the right's trying to preserve democracy. Well, why is that a good thing? And then the left is, well, we're trying to preserve democracy, and they're in this fake fight. Well, what if it's the case that the concept itself, what if it's the case that the entire Enlightenment project that the American culture is false, is based on false premises? Well, what if that? That's why you get people like me or Andrew or these other people, it's hard to put us in a place in the political paradigm because we don't really exist on either of those teams because we're questioning something way more foundational. And I think that's one of the things. I think your criticism of democracy, I don't think democracy in its form, whether it's defended on the right or the left, can lead to anything, any place other than where we're going right now that you see, right? This dumbed down, like I'm going to pull an opinion out of my pocket and throw it on the internet and call it voting or something like this. Yeah. I think it's foundationally broken. I think you've done talks with Rachel Wilson as well. The entire female liberation movement, the right side of things, the conservative TM tries to argue that, well, no, there was a really good form of feminism. Like, we should get back to that. I don't think so. I think that's false. I think that the seed of all of these liberal takes have led us exactly to what you just summarized, which is the dumbing down, the idiocracy. Everybody is running off just their preferences. And guess what? Modernity and technology, and we're vulnerable to this too, is that all this technology gives us such a level of convenience that we're not even forced to argue from more fundamental positions because we push a button, dude, and we get what we want in like a day from Amazon. Now we prefer that. You and I both. Oh, if you want a new microphone, that's great. It comes in Thursday. But I mean, we'd be lying to say there isn't something in the back of our mind going, well, I mean, there might be a disadvantage to this. There might be a consequence to this that we're not really tackling right now.
Man, there's a lot of good points in there, a lot of things to unpack. I mean, one of the things is that I personally don't even know where I sit anymore. If there's like a straight line between right and left, I think I'd be like out here somewhere, like
right,
maybe on the far,
like off
like
the
far
line,
right, like like way out. But yeah, so when we were having a chat last time about libertarianism, I remember us having the analogy of the boat. So there's like the people are on the boat and the libertarians sort of helping them to get to the other side, something like that. And I'm still in this place where I feel like it's more like I'm a spider now, and I've got my tentacles in all these, like your Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and much more leaning towards you guys, like you and Andrew and Rachel. But I kind of don't want to let them go because I agree with Charlie Kirk about a lot of things that he says with the culture war, and we can relate in those ways. And Jordan Peterson, completely disagree with him about his takes on foreign policy. But in terms of young men and masculinity and purpose, I think he has some great things to say there. And you kind of don't want to let go, but but it puts you in this place where you don't really know where you sit in terms of the conventional sort of spectrum. So it's difficult to know these days, and it's like, what's the game that we're playing here? Like, do I want to take one of these teams, or do I want to be a lone wolf over here with your little crew? It's a tough one.
Yeah. Your crew gets smaller for sure if the more it's filtered down. Now, I will say that your approach, looking out there, it is true that even someone who you 85% disagree with what they say, they might say some true thing, and you can hold on to that, and you can say, well, I agree with them here, of course. The question then is, well, what is the view that you hold that you're able to pull out these truths from all of these people, right? Even if you disagree with 80% of the rest of them. And this approach has actually largely been used in theology itself. Like it's like, what's called an apophatic approach. You can do away with something that's incoherent, and you might be left with some nugget of truth that they have. But the nugget of truth that they have doesn't mean that they're somehow should be followed as some sort of leader, right? And that's kind of your approach, is that you go, oh, here's Jordan Peterson. I agree here with him, and I disagree with him here. And you're kind of sifting. It's almost like you're in Target, and you're shopping, and you're pulling things that you like into the cart and leaving maybe the box. You took some of the bag out and left the shitty box, cereal box or whatever, right? Yeah. But then it's like, that's what's interesting, is that and I've experienced this too, very similar path that you're on, is that you kind of look out and you go, well, I can't accept this very strict false binary left-right thing, even though left-right exists. I hate when people say that doesn't really exist. No, there is a left and a right. Yeah, for sure. But we already see through that that's not the wholeness of what we're participating in. So we're getting into this nuanced position, and it is kind of like lonely in a sense, because you keep filtering down your position where you really don't exist out there in the fully represented world, right?
Yeah, and
that's where, Jake, you should start screaming about, now we should start screaming about diversity and inclusion, because we're underrepresented now. So.
Yes, we're minorities. But also, it's kind of this strange thing that happens where you don't really fit into a box, and you piss everyone off, because I don't agree with the US helping out Israel, for example. I don't think that they should have any attachment to them. They have no reason to. I think that people are totally brainwashed with that. And then you get the people who are like staunch. They've read this sort of the what's it called, the Bible? It's got all of the different translations or whatever. But
dispensationalism. The Schofield Bible. The
Schofield Bible. They've read all that, and then they're like, how can you possibly not agree with this? You're whatever, an anti-Semite, whatever they want to call you. But it's like, no. Like, you can disagree with me about that, but you can still listen to my positions. We can still have a conversation. And this is something that I feel like I want to do, is have these conversations and disagree and agree. But people are so quick to just sort of like do away with you if you have one opinion that they don't like. So it's this tough thing where it's like, you want to be have your own sort of mind and your own worldview, but people never give you the same sort of respect. So I guess there's not really much you can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reactionary thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I criticize, like, I don't know, some silly leftist position, right, or whatever it is, and the response is always so NPC. It's just like, oh, you're Trump daddy. And I'm like, well, obviously you haven't heard my takes on any of that, obviously. So people are in this constant reactive state. And we do reaction videos. So you'll do a video, and then someone who agrees with you, but fundamentally wants to be in opposition to you will do this thing. And this is the other part, is that we're also in an industry that basically thrives on the ping pong game anyway. That there's this constant back and forth, and I don't think it's unhealthy necessarily. It's just that it's a feature of what we do. And so, you're saying, well, I'm stuck in the middle, right? I'm not entirely a centrist. I'm, like you said, it's a funny way to put it. There's a line between left and right, and people say, well, are you in the middle? And you're like, well, I'm not even on that axis. If it was a Cartesian plane, I'm over here. I'm not even really involved in the conversation. But I think that's good, because you now have your your legs in the different areas of the spider web, like you said, and that's good because you can pull people into different sections of the web, and that's a good position to be in. And you honestly come off as more what's it called? You're not like screaming your opinion and pointing to where we should go, which I think every man is going to have to do eventually, especially if you have kids. But there's an advantage that you have that I don't have, that some other people don't have, is that you're able to pull people of different opinions in, and you don't scare them out of your web, right? Someone like me, loud, arrogant, pointing to what I think the answer is, aggressively trying to take down opposition. There's an advantage to what the position you're in, honestly. And so, I wouldn't overthink it too much, but I will tell you, there might be a moment where you do have to state something that's a little bit more polarizing than you're used to. I don't know when that is. I always link it with fatherhood, though. That seems to be where things kind of go, wait a second, I'm a little bit more aggressive. Yeah.
I do see that on the horizon, and I think I understand that moment will come, but my sort of philosophy with this is that you have to build an army before you go to war. So when that day does eventually come, hopefully the army's big enough that I can make some sort of a difference. But one of the things is that we're losing touch with objectivity so much these days. And if you're grounded in a Christian worldview, like you are, and like I'm learning about all the time, but I think I'm pretty firmly grounded in my worldview these days, you can know objective truth, and everything kind of tends to filter out from there. And you can take positions based on that. And it's sort of this magnetism towards the middle where I believe you can sit. And then on the outside, things get so crazy, but always sort of come back to the middle in a way. And if you know what I'm saying here, like for example, the birth rates, that's one thing where people are going out. They're not having kids. They're going way out of the norm, but then it might come back to the middle because the Christians are going to have babies, and we're going to realize that this problem is so big that people are going to come back to the middle, come back to the truth, and come back to the objective. So do you see this playing out at all, that although things are so mental at the moment and people are going in all these different crazy ways, that there could be some sort of a renaissance where people come back and are magnetized towards objectivity?
Yeah. I think I hope that we're at the beginning of sort of a new golden age, especially art and architecture. People kind of leave this out of conversations generally, but what you said is, well, no, there is an objective truth. There is beauty. There is something ultimately true about reality, and you see this a lot. Like what you described as the surface people, they have no real core foundation. They try to borrow from that. Like they'll be like, we got to do away with all these terrible religions. By the way, we're starting this church, the church, whatever it is, the secular church, the woke church, or whatever. And so as they filter out, and Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, where they lose objectivity because they think language can redesign reality. And what we're saying is no matter how you redefine things, there is something objectively true that you can't deny, whether it's the regularity of nature, the laws of physics, the distinction between men and women, the fact that reality is basically fundamentally male dominated, right? This is a huge thing with politics, right? Because the assumption is, no, we have egalitarianism. We can redescribe reality so that we're interchangeable widgets, as Andrew would say. Well, no, that's not true. Because everything's fundamentally backed by force and the threat of force. So you're really pointing to something interesting, and I think on the horizon here is that the pendulum is going to swing, and I think it's on its way, like this very slow peak of the grandfather clock, and it's coming back, or some sort of catastrophe, because I have this button on my live stream that's called concerns that go away with food shortages, I say, and all of these like pronoun stuff. You think about like, you know what I mean? Like, let's say something happened where scarcity went super high with ordinary things, water, food, shelter, and it was like horrific, right? All of these superficial things you're talking about on the outside, right, on the surface of this this analogy of the ball, those things go away. I mean, when you're trying to get bread, you're not going to fight on your walk to the village to try to find bread. You're not going to fight someone because they misgendered you. That's gone. The whole thing's gone. So that's why I talk about modernity a lot, is that modernity, technology, all this advancement, we're in the age of decadence if you're looking at it cyclically. I don't know if you've had like Jonathan Peugeot on, but that would be a great person to have on to talk about these cycles of decadence that then enable these very superficial takes that men can be women, that you can do anything, everything.
So just quickly, in terms of decadence, for those of you who are listening, are you talking about like when society becomes wealthy and opulent and liberal and urbanized?
So prosperous, right. So prosperous that they start to redefine what reality is, because their initial reality, which is to be fed, clothed, that's all handled. They don't even think about it. It's on automation, basically. So why are we surprised that in that kind of state that they wouldn't go out in their mind and go, well, maybe I can be a furry. Well, maybe I can live a life as a lab, like a golden retriever. Well, that's possible because of the decadence. Now, I think the shift that you're talking about, it could be a combination of these two things, either a resurgence of the family via proliferation of kids, because we have the advantage. Christians and theists and even Muslims have the advantage against secularists, that we're going to be the ones populating. So that could be a shift in the pendulum. But the other thing could be some sort of, disaster. And I'm not an accelerationist. I'm not one of those people who go, we got to cause the flattening of society and technology so we can rebuild. No, to me, that's a demonic take. But it's a really good point, Jake, because we ask, well, what is the thing that's going to bring us back to a core truth about reality? And I think those things that you mentioned on the surface, there's no foundation anyway, right? So they're going to get swept away in the wind of trends anyway. And so what do you look to? You look to the things that are foundationally true across time, across civilizations, and you look and you hold on to those things. And so that's what's happening now.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. That's actually a really good idea that you've got about the things that go away during a food shortage. I mean, I was seeing an argument the other day about air conditioning in office spaces. So the women, obviously they regulate their body temperature differently, and there was this whole debate about that. That's probably one thing that would go away with food shortages, plus plenty more. But I'm in Europe at the moment, and I'm looking around, and I'm staying right next to the old town in Bucharest, and the old churches and the artwork and the architecture. It's like beautiful. It's mesmerizing, and there's so much effort put into it. And then you look just to the right of it, and you'll see some commie block just slapped there. And it's just depressing to see what's come of these places, because during its peak, you can imagine what Christian European societies would have looked like. So you said that there's been a renaissance of sorts, for lack of a better term, I guess, in art and architecture. I'm seeing the total opposite, but I'd love to get a little bit of positivity about it.
I'm saying hopefully we're at the beginning of this pushback where there's a new golden age of art and beauty, because like you said, this is such a fascinating topic when you talk about the external world, architecture, streets, how cities are built. This is the distinction I see. The secular, godless view that worships essentially efficiency, right? How could it not be a city of blocks that are designed to be replaceable, taken down for new companies and so forth? Everything's square. And you look at something like Europe, people have been to Italy, you see these giant piazzas and arches. Well, they don't really serve an efficiency. They don't serve the god of efficiency. In fact, they're inefficient. Like a retail space owner would look at a piazza and say, they'd be like, oh my God, this is such a waste of space. Like something like that. But they don't, because they're part of a culture, a heritage that values something above efficiency. And this fundamental distinction between a materialist, someone who just wants efficiency, more of what I want faster, versus someone like me who holds a Christian view, that my Christian view would then inform architecture. It's not an accident that Richard Dawkins is suddenly nearing his deathbed God bless him, that he's like, well, I love the cathedrals. I love all of the traditions. I just don't want anybody to be in the churches. But I want them there. And this is the flaw in the mindset, right? The flaw is he's not connecting the ideology to its fruits. He's not connecting that there is a correlate between the view that God exists, the view that there is beauty, and how to embody that or make iconography of that. Like in Orthodoxy, there's iconography, but this term iconography, people take it as it's just these pictures that these people kiss on Sunday or whatever. No, the view is that buildings themselves, homes, people are icons. Now, from that view, if you say we're icons of God, that a building should be seen through the lens that it's built for God, wouldn't it follow that it would be more beautiful? Wouldn't it follow that it wouldn't just be this brutalist square, right? That's concrete and cold and gross. It's what you're pointing to is that the architecture that we're experiencing, think about the experience that it has on people that we don't even know when you walk through a cold, dark, square city that's just corporatized completely, black rock signs everywhere, versus when you escape. By the way, you notice how these Western people go on vacation and they don't go to places that are square? They go where? They go to ancient places that embody this veneration of God, right?
Yeah, and if they're not there, they're going to the natural, beautiful places that also do the same thing.
Right. And it's not based on efficiency, and that's a key thing. That's why the word decadence or modernity, it really is tied into this philosophy of getting to more efficient places. Well, it turns out that human beings aren't actually fulfilled with efficiency. We're all living this right now. We're not fully fulfilled with just because we can get things on time or the next day. We are missing out on the experience of sort of being human through the external world, which we have a say in how it looks. Now, we're basically in the artless form of architecture now. It's dead. So it can't be dead forever. It's got to come back. So new architects have this huge opportunity to build beautiful structures again that are in through the lens of venerating God, building something that's beautiful for the sake of beauty, not for the sake of, well, it moves a lot of people in and out. You know how many tabletops we can fit in here? We gotta move. This is all falling apart now. I think people are seeing the flaw in this. Even Richard Dawkins, that's amazing that he even sees that.
Yeah, I mean, on Dawkins, one thing, and you might be able to help me square this circle, but when I look at his famous quote that it says, we're all just sort of matter in motion, blind, pitiless indifference. Do you know, what's that quote? You'd know it?
Yeah. The universe is blind, pitiless indifference, and there's no matter to the matter, something like that.
But then he's got a podcast. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's called The Poetry of Reality. And if you say the poetry of reality, you're inferring that there's a rhyme and a rhythm and beauty there. So how do you square those? What is the poetry of reality if we're all blind, pitiless indifference?
No, it's a contradiction. Poor Dawkins is always in a contradiction. He said there's nothing actually immoral, and he went on Joe Rogan and said how deeply immoral it is to teach children that hell exists or something like this. And you're like, well, this is a contradiction. That one's big right there. What you said, that there's some sort of order. Like, can you imagine arguing that there's poetry without order?
Yeah,
without
exactly.
this assumption of form, that even the terms that you're referencing in poetry have some sort of absoluteness to them, that there are universal categories, like universal things that we refer to, like flowers and water and mountains and sky, that these things all exist together in a uniform way that you're referring to, but it's all from disorder and complete pitiless indifference. This makes no sense. That means your own reasoning, Richard Dawkins, is disordered and indifferent and from complete chaos, right? Like this assumption that you can create or even discern beauty from chaos is insane. Now, the one thing that they always do is they grant themselves this thing called the mind that's observing and describing beauty. Well, what gives you that from a complete disorder? I mean, what gave you that? I think he's probably, hopefully, he's wrestling with these things in his later years, and trying to find a way to wrap it up in a bow before the time comes. And I hope he does, find that bow, so to speak.
Yeah, I do too, because when I was looking at that podcast name the other day, it struck me because I wanted to speak to him and be like, what do you mean by poetry? Because when you're saying poetry, when I think of poetry, I think of obviously people like Shakespeare, and there's a genius behind it, there's a creator behind it, there's a rhyme and a rhythm, and there's also a much deeper meaning behind it, because poetry tends to tell a story. It tends to fill us with sort of emotions that we couldn't experience from just writing a story on a page. It's like this rhythmic experience, and it's inherent, and it kind of, the word poetry in itself almost speaks to such a religious experience, but he can't square that with himself, and he thinks that I love reality, I love life, I love world and nature and beauty, but it's just
meaningless.
Sort of,
I love poetry, but it's like he needs, I think he needs to be visited by Jordan Peterson a little bit more. I think Jordan Peterson is in the position to troll these people a little bit harder. Like can you imagine Peterson visiting him later in his life when he's in like a wheelchair, and Peterson just comes in and he's like, well, it depends on what you mean by poetry. It's like you're reading this book looking out a window and you're pretending that this is all pitiless indifference. That's fucking crazy. He starts crying, next to him.
Yeah, 100%. That would be amazing. So I just want to continue on the topic of beauty and art a little bit more, because it's something that I find is like deeply moving. And like, I'm not somebody who's a massive art buff or a massive architecture buff myself, but I do notice that it resonates with me on a level that you can't quite explain. And when I go around to these more brutalist parts of Europe, and when I see the commie block, it's just it's deflating and demoralizing. Yeah. But when I set up my desk next to like a cathedral, and I've got to work and I can watch that, and there's this beautiful symmetry and there's these detailed designs, and you wonder what went on through history there. It's so much nicer and better. And the thing that I wonder is this just a part of this larger sort of postmodern idea of deconstruction? Is it this sort of post-World War II nihilism that we're seeing, where they say, everything's tried, we've reached this part of history where nothing's true, we're just going to dismantle everything? Or is it more due to the efficiency that you were talking about before, just more consumerist ideology?
Yeah, I think it's a combo of those two. I couldn't parse out the ingredients, percent of each of those. But the fact that we have so much technology does lead us to more efficient ways of doing things, as opposed to just carving an arch because we carved an arch in a building, right? You don't argue the efficiency of it. Now, maybe an architect or an engineer could say, well, actually, there is some strength efficiency to certain beautiful forms. But I think it's a combination of this rejection of God, but not just God, but meaning altogether, which would be this ultimate nihilistic approach. But you pair a nihilistic approach with this efficiency model, it's a terrible combo, and it's a contradiction, because then for a nihilist to value anything, even if it's efficiency, is already a performative contradiction. But I think it's both. I think that's this dead coldness is a result of efficiency, but I think people choose efficiency as a result of a nihilistic approach. And so, from that view, I think it's maybe a 50-50 split between the two.
It kind of does make sense.
I'm glad people are recognizing it, though, because, just people's experience of life and beauty and things they can't really deny. The brutalists' cold, concrete, wet-looking square building, is not going to reflect the beauty that you experience in a good relationship with a loved one, a family member, a mother, father, sibling, whatever. Like, there's nothing going to be tying your reality, your whole reality, relationships, your view of nature, whatever your view on God is. Like, the brutalist building will never merge into that your other experiences. And now if it did, I would be depressed. That would be depressing, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Can you imagine a brutalist building?
Yeah.
That's the other thing I wonder too, is like, the people who are in these positions of power and creating architecture, designing cities, if they really are nihilists and their relationships are deadened and they're not based in a higher power or anything, I mean, maybe it's fair to say that their creations are reflections of their relationships. Now that's, to me, is that's sad. That's a terrible scenario if that's the case. And you see it with other art, like you see the deadened, upside down, demonic shit in entertainment now, right? This imagery has always been the case, at least in modern music and stuff, all the way back to like rhythm and blues, and there's always this weird demonic secret element going on. But now it's so visual, like we looked at the Olympic Games, or you can look at like Lady Gaga concerts. I mean, it's endless. This reference to upside downness. Now this is an architecture, but it's similar. Why? Because from my view, these are all icons. So from my view, we're constantly in a battle of iconography between God and Satan. Demonic. There's demonic iconography. Pornography is demonic iconography. Upside down world buildings, ducks with mustaches, Picasso. All of this inversion is iconography, and we're in this constant battle. I mean, think about how many images we see a day. You and me, being in this industry of like, you're constantly, looking for new source material to comment on. Almost all of it is this rapid speed iconography of what? What is it representing is our question. And that's a good question for us. What is it representing? Because you just said you looked out to the right of you and you see a cathedral. That's not just some accidental representation of nothing. That was deliberate to represent something. Now, I think the rapid speed of tech allows people to make things that don't even need to represent anything.
Yeah.
It just doesn't even need to. Oh, I just made this thing. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. It's interesting because here's what comes to mind when I think about the things that you just said. So when we talk about buildings and architecture, and we've got this like sort of dialectic happening between the good and the ugly and the beautiful. And then we look at pornography, for example. It's another great example where you've got this this really demonic representation of what relations should look like between men and women, and has all of these terrible byproducts. And then also the Olympic Games. You've got this ceremony and this event that is meant to represent like the pinnacle of human achievement. It's meant to be these people who are the ultimate athletes. And it's this place that you can go to witness objectivity, because it's objectively beautiful to see somebody fly through the air and do long jump. And there's no DEI medals. I mean, they probably could make it happen somehow. But,
oh, yes.
Yeah. But it's this representation of goodness and of truth and of beauty. And there's this overt, and media industry as well. I mean, music is another beautiful thing, but there's this overt effort to just uglify everything. And we see it with people these days as well, all these ugly people. But it seems just what I'm getting at is that it's so overt. When you've got this contrast, it's very depressing. When we've got the Olympics and the beauty and the goodness contrasted with this really dark imaging, it's almost like this overt spiritual battle that's happening before our eyes.
I believe that. I wholly believe that. And that it always borrows. That's the good news, is that any overt expression that's demonic, notice how it doesn't have its own positive. It's always borrowing and inverting something good. And that's something to remember if you do have a Christian lens, or even a general theistic lens of the good. Just remember that all the demonic upside downness is never creating its own thing. It's always borrowing. Even architecture, it's going to borrow from something absolutely true. Even engineering, there has to be something invariant for engineering to even be possible. And so there's something absolute, except they just twist it just a little, right? The Olympic Games is funny because they're trying to make fun of all the right-wing Christians going, you're mocking the Last Supper. And they're like, no, it's not like that. It's, it's the celebration of, what is it, Bonacalia or something? Or you're like, oh, okay. It's an orgy reference. Okay. Oh, I was going to say, yes. So, but you're right. I thought about the Olympics too, how, there's no better event that could, if it could, bring together all people under a paradigm that says we're all people here, right? Some sort of this is humanity statement. Well, can you imagine if you were Jake, if you were a demon and you wanted the best possible point in time or event to take over, to make a re-image of what humanity is. I mean, wouldn't it be the Olympics? I mean, that's what I would do as a demon. I'd be like, I need to bid on that event. I need to be the orchestrator of that event.
I think you're going to see more of it. C.S. Lewis did one more chapter in Screw Tape Letters, it would have been that.
Yeah, one more. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I expect to see more of it. I mean, any world. This is the other thing, is that what we consider a sort of a world event like the Olympics. Imagine before technology, it was just radio. I mean, it was still a world event, but it was limited in its proliferation, right? It wasn't an image per second. It was like a radio voice. Maybe you had a TV. If you look at technology, I don't know there's a single event that wasn't the Olympics that isn't also a worldly event by merely being posted online. And you think about this and you go, wow, the Olympics, as far as like it being an event that everybody's watching at the same time, the internet itself is this ongoing event in a way too. And so that the battle of let's say if we're talking about it through the framework of iconography, there's a battle of iconography. What is being represented? What is it our eyes are seeing? If that's a battle, I mean, we're going to be constantly flooded with inversion. Inversion is going to win that war, by the way. I hate to be like a black pill. Inversion is going to win the war of like images in the world, because we're in the world, right? So it's going to be worldly.
Do you think that it's the reason why it's going to win is it's because it's much easier to go down that path? Because if you look at the two different paths and you look at the path of virtue, for example, and of truth and goodness and beauty, I think that this is something that actually requires some sort of like effort and being learned. Right. Like if you build a structure, it takes a long time and you have to engineer it and you have to design it and you have to get people to do it. But if you want to break it down, throw some paint on it and it's so much easier.
That's right. I agree with that. I think, like, let's say, is it harder to walk a very narrow path, or is it harder to walk it's a broad path that you can go in any direction? It doesn't matter. Well, obviously, the narrow is going to be harder. This applies to a Christian view, but also applies to anyone who takes a view that work ethic, even if you were a, what are those people called? It's like a German philosophy of like seeking punishment, almost like living through your
masochism.
Your
masochistic?
No, not masochism. I forgot what it's called. Someone in your chat will correct me. That view, it's way easier, like you said, to just throw paint up and call it abstract. It's way easier for a Lady Gaga to throw up color on a person on stage, like, you know, a colorful vomit. Well, it's harder when the art teacher says we have an art competition coming up and here are the standards. Well, notice how, in the analogy of the art teacher, we're in an era of time where the art teacher is saying there's a competition out there in the world called creativity or whatever. And then the student raises their hand and goes, well, what's the standard? And they say no standard. Well, what wins? What wins in a competition of no standards? Well, what wins is loud, disgusting, provocative, right? Jarring. That becomes the standard, right? There's no standard. Just like brutalism. Like, oh, well, I'm gonna make a really obtuse, crazy building that's just so jarring to people.
Yes, it's so true. It's so true. If there's no standard, that's standards. What happens. Like I used to live in this place called Hackney Wick in London. I lived there for 3 years, and this was when I first started boxing, before I cared about politics at all. Like I was there during Brexit, and I didn't even know it happened, and someone told me it happened the next day, and I was like, okay, whatever. But this exact thing was taking place because we lived in this community. It was super, super woke. I wasn't really involved because I was more into boxing, but I was watching everybody around me, and it was the more obtuse, the more ugly, the more jarring, as you said, the more popular the people were. And I look back on it now, and back then I just thought, oh yeah, it's like people are young, doing their thing, whatever. But I look back at it now, and I'm like, Yeah, there's this competition for badness and for and for ugliness and to be as like you said, as obtuse as possible. And I saw that happen before my very eyes. And it's like that's on the sort of micro level, but then as it goes out on the macro level, that's what it looks like. What we were just talking about.
Yeah, it's bizarre because you ask them, well, what are you trying to do? It's like that old meme where it's like, I'm so unique. And then you just pan out and everyone is saying I'm so unique. And then it's a paradox. Like no one's unique because everybody looks all crazy and wild and ugly and, has all the stuff going on. Well, I think they're at the end of their game because there's nothing more to hold on to. That, this is the question. What's the bottom of the barrel there? Like what's the lowest, what is it in substance abuse? What's the what do they call it? Rock bottom. What's rock bottom of that standardless position? I don't even know. I mean, I thought we were close to it. I think people defecating on the street in San Francisco or public displays of sex, during pride parades and all these things. I thought maybe, okay, well, this is the bottom, right, guys? And it's still apparently not. So
I think it's punctuated by it's like society is still somewhat intact, but seriously like punctuated, I guess, and littered with all of this. But if you can imagine how deep the pit of hell can go, how far down Dante's Inferno we could go,
right,
then we could go all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, I think it's basically, I think the bottom is no distinction between humans and animals. Wouldn't it?
Right.
Wouldn't the bottom be something like you walk out and you really don't even know if you're looking at an animal or a human based on behavior alone, like that whether that includes like, murder or public indecency or no control of your impulses. I mean, that's one of the distinctions with human beings is that we all have an impulse or many impulses that one could say is animalistic. But what makes us unique is that we do moral evaluations and we're able to overcome and supersede our impulses and through an ethical lens, through a thoughtful lens. And it seems to be that that's the thing that's being battled. Like people are arguing, well, just pursue your preference. Well, no. My own preference, if I'm stuck in traffic, you don't want to know what my preferences are at that moment, right? And you wouldn't say, Jim Bob, just follow through with your preferences. No. That's insane.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, I've got an idea that I want to chop up with you. I mean, it's something that I've just been thinking about a lot lately because I've seen a few of these debates. I think Andrew did one the other day on whatever, where he was talking to these two male feminists and they were saying to him, like, you go on these podcasts and you exploit these young girls. And it was just, these guys were proper white knights. Did you watch that debate?
Oh man, I was commenting. I was like, I think the 304 chicks are better or more tolerable than these guys.
Yeah.
Just because they're men. Like your contrast in your head of going like, what is a man in how they performed? You're just like, go ahead though.
Yeah, it was shocking. But these podcasts, I think that people are so quick to shit on them. The whatever podcast, the Fresh and Fit podcast, and obviously everyone who does this content creating wants an element of shock and wants an element of clickbaitiness, and I get that. But why, in the broadest perspective, are people really like watching these and so in tune with them? And I tend to think that the dating problem is such an important part of our culture, and people think that these podcasts are just these sort of nothing conversations between dumb people. But like you said before, they're a representation of a much broader spectrum of the population. Like all of this narcissism that we're seeing, it's very, very widespread, and it's largely due to social media in many ways and the inflation of the ego and what have you. But this problem with the dating market that we're seeing, obviously if people aren't pair bonding, then they're not going to have families. And if we don't have a strong nuclear family, then we don't have strong communities. If we don't have strong communities, we don't have a strong society. So it's almost like this is the seedbed of this huge problem that we have. And people are not really realizing, because the people who are talking about it generally aren't dating anymore, they're not realizing the magnitude of the problem, and that actually what you're seeing here is the very seedbed and this really chaotic discussion about something that is going to grow in, hopefully, to a thriving jungle. But at the moment, it's just dying.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's a great way of putting it, that there are people who go, I hate what that is. Why are you doing this? Well, who else are you going to engage with other than the sample set of the kind of culture you're battling? I mean, who else are you going to engage with? Now, they could engage more with men, but I think that's a good idea as well, because men ultimately end up being the leaders of this. I would even say the cause of it, if we go back to permitting feminism to grow, or even general egalitarianism itself as this kind of philosophy. Going after the men who engage with this stuff. I thought it was interesting that those two guys were arguing, you know, that, oh, Andrew, you're shaming these people and you're causing harm to them, and yet they're defending these chicks being in pornography. They're ignoring the correlate between women in pornography and early childhood traumas and abuse and all these other things, drugs, addiction, the fact that you can, in mainstream pornography, you could find a list of women who died at the average age of like 25, right? You know, suicide, all this crazy stuff. And they're just going, no. If they want to do it, I mean, that's what they're, and then they're asked, would you advocate this for your own daughter? He says, no. I mean, it's the end of the debate. Now, I always go right to that, by the way. That's why fathers are so important. That's why it's important that men become fathers if they can, is because that's going to really give you where you stand. I remember holding my child for the first time and having this shedding moment of like, holy shit, everything I pretended or thought I believed about, you do you, bro, this kind of... It was gone in a single moment of looking at my child.
Interesting.
And this is the problem with the dudes that he's debating, is that they have no concept, right, of like a larger view of society and impact, that you as a man, you actually do impact at the familial level, to the, like you set it out, the familial to the community, to the state, to the federal, whatever it is. And they're just acting in a vacuum. They think that pornography is in a vacuum. They think their own proclivities are just a vacuum, right? It's not. You can't even argue this anymore. Even the birth rate thing, if that's downstream from a secular do what you want view, there's no consequences for sex, you can just abort the baby, you can just be promiscuous. This pair bonding problem is going to be catastrophic, and they're just ignoring the numbers. They're looking at these numbers going down from 1.5 to under 1 in a lot of countries, and they're going, well, no, someone else will do it, bro. And yet they have the nerve to point at Andrew and go, you're being mean, right? Well, no, we're going, you're being basically maniacal. Like, you're basically operating from a perspective that if you continue and more people continue, there's no civilization. There's no civilization to be mean in. And they're just not getting it. They're like, oh, no, I'm just going to keep everything's good. Everything's good, you guys. No, it's actually not. There's a massive problem there. And it's downstream from a worldview. It's not just some accident that that people aren't procreating. It's like you said, why would you procreate if you can have sex and have all the feel-good stuff without any of the consequences of being a father, and then expanding your responsibility in the world to other people, right? Why would you do it if you can just get it, right? And that's what we're getting. We're a bunch of children, man. A bunch of little man babies.
Yeah. So tell me about like when you did first become a dad, because this is something I'm always interested in, because I am not a dad yet. I'd absolutely love to be in the next few years if I find a nice lady, but hopefully that will come. But when you first did become a dad, first of all, like how nerve-wracking is it, and how weird is it? And then is it a feeling that's describable, or is it something that's completely alien?
I don't know if the visceral experience of becoming a dad is describable. I guess different people, depending on where they are in their views, will experience it differently. Because from my view, it was a relief, because like I said, when I first held my firstborn, and I have 3 kids, it was a relief because there was all this bullshit I thought I believed that just kind of went away, and I didn't choose it to. It just was like, oh, you got to let go of all the bullshit you pretend to believe in, you pretend to be about. I was into like, everybody has their own view, everybody's living their truth kind of bullshit, sort of a new age take. And that went away. So, because it felt like here's how I can describe it. It felt like I was put through a colander. I don't know what you call that in Australia, where you put the noodles in the strainer.
Oh yeah.
To strain the water.
Yeah.
I felt like I was put through a sifter like that, and what came out of the bottom is only the necessary things for being a father. Like everything else was added garbage. Does that make sense? Like all the stupid takes. So that's good. But someone else who becomes a father might feel the experience of being threatened because their current status or their life, how it is. Like maybe they party, maybe they were in an open relationship, and maybe everything that they wanted and desired was on this conveyor belt for them, and that might change now. Now that person who values their fleshly desires over their called duty to be a father, they might experience holding a baby for the first time as completely horrific, like a nightmare. But I didn't. I was very happy that there was something that intervened with what I thought I was currently valuing at the time, which was just pursuit of my own wants and desires. Well, that changes because you have to put aside your wants and your preferences to be a good father. There's no doubt about it. And, a man, it's very feminine for a man to pursue their desires only and just be like, I'm going to pursue my preferences. I mean, that's no different than a chick being like, I want to go to the mall and get this purse. And that's what we see now is a bunch of men basically a slave to their fleshly wants, right? And I think that getting a family is something that I can't promise will jolt you out of that. But if you're wanting to be jolted out of that, I think a child will, out of all of the things, aside from just God intervening directly with something horrific or whatever, that a child is the thing that's going to do that for a man.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that I think is really important in terms of messaging for young guys these days is to understand that is the ultimate goal. Because, if you don't really have that, and if you're just living for, like you said, your fleshly desires, like I've got a bit of money and I've done some traveling and I've had good experience and I've experienced like women and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't mean very much. At the end of the day, it's not really, as Andrew said in that on stage interview that you guys did, it doesn't contribute to I think he said, to the apparatus of a good society. And I love that because it makes so much sense, because if you're just projecting inwards all the time, it's almost like it rots you inside as a person a little bit. But if you can project who you are as a man outwards, then there's no limit to how much it can expand. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you being a strong male figure, a male father, when people can see that, younger men at least have a positive image of what that is. And you're not going to get that in entertainment, right? The Homer Simpson effect, the Ted Bundy effect. Isn't Ted Bundy? Al Bundy, Married with Children. Ted Bundy too. Yeah. It's always, everything today is the dumb dad, the dumb cucked man dad. This is what it is to be a man. Oh, I don't want that. That sounds horrible. No, that's a lie. That whole thing is a lie. It's interesting that you said it's the ultimate value, because even in the sort of red pill community, they use these terms like high value man, high value woman. Right? Well, let's say you found a high value man and a high value woman. I always ask these people, for what?
Why? It's a great question. Question. Yeah.
Right? Because what is a high value man if not that man become a father? What is it?
I think that I've come to the conclusion. High value man?
I've
come to the conclusion recently, and I can't really think of a better way to explain it than a man who has a grown-up daughter who loves and respects him. Because the idea of raising a daughter with all the troubles, because with a son you can kind of like get along, I think it's easier. But with a daughter, if you get to the age where she's the age of exactly. If you get to the age of where she's at the age of 30 and she's married and she loves and respects you and takes your advice and your counsel, you have done something seriously right. So I can't think of a better explanation for what a high value man is than that. And, I'm lucky that my old man passed away when I was younger. When I was about 14, he got really sick and then died when I was a teenager. But he was like the best dad you can ever imagine. So I was really lucky to have that. But unfortunately, with the fatherlessness crisis these days, a lot of guys don't have that example. Like, You know, like my dad was really hardworking and just really loving and spent his time with us and very selfless and everything. But if you don't have that, man, like that's a tough one.
Yeah. No, it is. It's really horrific. But also to be in a society that just doesn't apparently value it, or hides the value of it, like explicitly tries to hide the good positive representation of what a man and a woman could be, right? It's just hidden. It's deliberately hidden from entertainment and all these things. And it's a shame because the men actually seek it. Younger men do seek father figures. Now, we have, even if we use a pejorative like your internet daddy, I don't even think that's inherently bad, to use the term, because it shows that young men are looking for the figure that if it was absent, in their lives, they're going to try to replace it. Now, the problem is there's a battle of who's replacing that figure. And we have to, as men especially, you have to confront that this is the reality, is that there is a battle. You know how they always say, oh, there's a battle for your attention. Well, that's generally true, right? We're in an attention economy. But if you get more rigorous with, well, what's attention to what? And you go, oh, what is it to be a man? What is it to be a woman in society? What is a good family? What is a good society? If they dominate in selling young men that a woman should basically embody a porn star, they've already gotten to the man. Now, if they also sell that the man, to be a good man, is just simply collect cars and things, they've already gotten to the man as well. And so it's a two-pronged attack from this view, and we have to battle it as such because, the war on the mind of men is really a war of like desires, their fleshly desires versus their duties. And I think duties, this is my critique as well, not my personally, but many people critique of the entire Enlightenment project, rights, right? Oh, well, we love America because we have rights and we're free. We always ask, do you have any duties? And it produces such silence because they go, wait a second, what am I? Are there any duties? If I get my rights and I get my gun and I get to travel and I get to do what I want as long as I don't hurt people, do I have any duties? And I think what happened in the last 200 years plus is that men have been bombarded with this idea that they don't really have any duties. They just have what they got,
maybe it
and they try
goes
to
hand
get
in
more.
hand with the freedom, though, because if you have duties, then that maybe inhibits your freedom. If you say that you have a duty to, for example, be a father, or if you have a duty to do something with your life that elevates the entire community that you're a part of, and if you have a duty to sort of project your sort of masculine integrity outwards, then that inhibits your freedom because then, well, hold on, now I'm not free to like smoke bongs and play video games.
Right. Yeah, you're not. Your actual freedom comes from the discipline to not follow all of the things that are available from having freedom, right? Because freedom itself can't be a virtue. That's why ultimately we reject libertarianism. Even if you grab some of the things in the bundle that you agree with, ultimately the view doesn't provide any basis for duties. Well, you have all this freedom. So what ought you do with all your freedom now? The answer can't be pursue more freedom because that's like going to Burning Man, right? And seeing that there's nothing built and saying this is ultimate freedom. What should we do? Well, if the pursuit was freedom, you wouldn't do anything, right? You just sit in your freedom. Like sitting under a tree and doing nothing, isn't it free? I mean, why would you get up? Do you have a duty to get up from under the tree? That's the question, and that's a question we have to posit to men. Why? Because if it's a duty to lead, and you agree that in the descriptive reality is dominated and led by men. There's no way around this. You can put on all the wigs you want. You can try to fake people out, right? Visually, the reality is that of dominated by brute force. And if that's the reality, the only question is what ethical system is informing when we use force or not. I mean, it's really basic.
Yeah, I think that the political sphere is very odd at the moment. And I want to kind of tie this into what we were just saying before about masculine influence as well. because one of the things that I noticed in my own life is that when my dad went down, I instantly went towards gangs. Like within a month, I was expelled from my first school, and then I was around gangs and all these sorts of things because I lost that sort of guidance. And then eventually I was lucky enough to find a boxing coach and a mentor and then get into that. So I was fortunate in that regard. But I think a lot of the guys these days, either their dads are not very present and are more sort of like the Family Guy, Homer Simpson type dads that don't really assert any sort of values and duties and virtues in their kids. So there's something maybe that inherently causes a young man to look for mentorship and to look for a gang and to look for leadership and guidance. And maybe we're seeing this play out on the internet these days. Young guys are going towards video games and these Reddit communities and sub communities, and they're going towards different political factions on Twitter. And do you think that there is like a correlate there between young men who are looking for some sort of like a gang and joining in and getting politically mobiled?
Yeah, not just a gang, but who they are in the world of men is important to men. Like, it's important that you and me get respect from each other as peers, and we want the accolades and credit, and we want to basically who we are in the world is more determined from a man perspective from other men, because that comes from our father as well. We want to make our father proud. We want to live up to his name and so forth. So it's kind of funny you said gangs, because I think gangs, now I don't advocate for this, but if you're just using a descriptive method, gangs actually provide more of a structure of a family and a hierarchy that a man needs, that a young man needs, than a society of atomized consumers of men. Now, that doesn't mean you should go there because of it. It just means that the gravitation toward a gang, it's because the gang does actually embody an ordered society of a hierarchy that has a leader, that has lowers down. It actually better reflects God's created order than the atomized system. So doesn't that make sense that people would go to a gang, especially a man? They're going to look for their respect. They're going to try to earn respect in the family. There's a head of the family. It's like a substitute for a church versus a family, which in in Orthodoxy, they're related. They're an extension of each other. And so, why wouldn't you go to a gang? It seems like a totally accurate impulse. In fact, whatever the thing is that draws you toward a gang might actually be a good thing, not the gang. The thing that draws you is actually the thing that might be good, but you just chose the wrong structure, wrong family. So if young men are listening and you're in this position where you're at a loss of a father or father figure, and you feel this urge to go toward a gang, just know that that's just an inverted church. That's just some poorly structured church community. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good argument, to be honest, because when you do look at gangs, there is actually a lot of integrity that's required if you are a part of that system, because like you said, there's a hierarchy and you need to have respect and you need to be a man of your word. And if you're not, you're going to be punished for it, and there's nowhere to hide. You can't sort of run to mummy, this sort of thing. There's a feeling of independence about it. So the actual structures, if you just took away the actual violent crime and all these sorts of things, the structure of the gang itself actually does reflect like an orderly structure that you actually wouldn't learn from other places in polite society.
Yeah, it has duties. Like the distinction we're trying to make here is like, is there any duties? Well, guess what? If you're in a gang, you already have more duties than if you're just this floating atomized consumer in a liberal sort of libertarian utopia, right? You don't have any duties. You can float around. You have no obligations. In a gang, you're actually more likely to learn something. Just like people say they learned a lot in prison or whatever, or they learned a lot in the army, and they could list all the horrifying things about those systems. And yet there's something true that kind of breaks through it all. And I think you just summarized it, which is you have to have respect. You learn respect. You learn humility. You learn your place in the order, right? And that's something men. There's this whole culture now today of men rejecting authority. Now, this is a key feature of why it's a failed society, is because if you think you're a man by establishing authority over a woman, but you don't have an authority above you, it's useless. It's useless because you can't live out that foundation, that claim that there's a hierarchical system. And men today are basically misconstruing masculinity with they are their own gods. And really, they're missing the submission part. That's just why you really can't get away from, in my view, Christianity, because it perfectly describes, just like we described the value of a gang, the value of a gang that we're describing actually mimics the Christian landscape, if you will, the Christian paradigm of hierarchy. And it's a mistake if you're a man and you're out there banging your chest saying, "Woman, follow me, woman, follow me." And she goes, "Who are you? Who do you follow?" And you go, "No one, woman." This is a mistake. This is a dead end.
Yes, I completely agree, man. Just last topic here. I wanted to get your, I guess, review of the Fresh and Fit Live event that you did.
Sure.
Because that was one of the most, besides Hawk Tour, that's going to be one of the most viral moments of the entire year.
So
Wondering
funny.
if you've shaved your arms since then, and if that's like
Shave
something
my-
you're doing.
Come on,
regularly.
man. Poor guy. I think he got swatted. Don't do that to people. As much as you dislike Wes Watson, don't get him swatted. Don't do that to the guy. Yeah, that was wild because it was the pinnacle. Like I look at that guy, and God bless him, that he really does embody the end result of what we've been talking about as far as masculinity pursuing wants and desires and collecting items, cars, watches, clothing, that this is a dead end. And it was wild to see someone basically be the caricature. Like if I were to draw and think of a caricature of that worldview, that man's job here is to be really successful, but for success sake, be dominant, but for dominance sake, no really higher purpose to it. If I could create a caricature, it would be that guy. So it was wild to be on the stage with Andrew and looking over and just going, "Holy shit!" Like I couldn't fabricate this man.
Yeah.
And as far as the arguments, I mean, it was kind of a joke. Consider what Andrew and I are used to as far as the better debates, the higher level debates. It was like a joke, but it was necessary because it had to be exposed that this is misleading to men. Neither Andrew and I take a position that you shouldn't be successful, or you shouldn't value money, or you shouldn't try to gain wealth and success and all that. It's just that that can't be it on its own. And I don't think there was a better exchange this year that basically brought that to the forefront. I'm still getting texts from childhood friends. "Dude, I'm sure, scrolling the internet. I see you arguing with this wild wrestler-looking dude online." So it definitely made an impact, even if it was like low-tier cringe, right? The scenario itself is like cringy. But this is why, like you said before, there's a lot of criticisms of like these podcasts, whatever. Regardless of the criticisms, these key moments are actually impactful in the way that they sort of get distributed through the internet, and people go, "Oh shit, there's a point there. There is something being shown here." That materialism is a failed project, especially from a man's view. That's not a good enough reason to exist as a man or a father. And so that was my take on it. Other than that, it was just funny. It became like, I went on doing many tirades impersonating Wes Watson on my live stream, which you can find. Still to this day, people super chat and ask Wes Watson a question, and I'll scream at them for about 4 minutes. So
Okay, I'll have to check it out. No, I actually did though. I thought it was remarkably impactful, and that's what I really liked about it, because it's just like you said, man. You could not have painted a more perfect caricature there, and it's in the belly of the beast when it comes to the Red Pill podcasts. And I like Fresh and Fit. I've listened to a bunch of their podcasts. They do the Mad Money Mondays, and they give a lot of great advice, financial advice, and fitness advice, and all of that. And even the ones with the girls are hilarious sometimes. And it's a reflection of culture as much as people don't like to see it. But that particular moment was like the eyeballs that were on that were like a lot of young guys who were seeing that, and they were like, hold on a second, maybe like the emperor doesn't wear any clothes here. This guy who's sort of screaming at us and who has all of this sort of masculine authority, and it's not really real. And when it's put up to the test, it's exposed in a very brutal way.
It was brutally exposed. And again, it's not even anything Andrew and I necessarily said. We kind of just pulled the teeth out. We let him talk. The dude told me to shave my arms as an argument for what's masculine. Like I don't care like if you do that with your body or whatever, or maybe you're ripped and you want to see it. You see but just any ordinary dude with hairy arms. I mean, why wouldn't you say that about a beard or anything else? Like So it was. You're right. It was like a perfect examination of the problem, but put on like level 10, like a highlight. You turn up the volume on what it is we're arguing against. There's not a better caricature. And again, as far as Fresh and Fit, I like that they do that stuff. In fact, being introduced to Fresh and Fit as a podcast, I looked at Myron's other stuff, and I actually watched the Fed Reacts stuff way more. Now it's not as popular because it's way more in depth. It's political. It's got an element of like the justice system involved. I honestly think that's 10 times more valuable from my own opinion of the two podcasts, but there's a reason why one's super popular and one like Fed Reacts is not as popular, because it's more dense, it's more involved. It's not just like topical conversations, but there's certainly a value to all of those podcasts, and I'm actually glad they bring people on that can argue. I mean, we should be happy that the podcasts that we would otherwise despise and hate and think is garbage, that they bring in people who can actually debate and wreck some of these horrific views. Now, are they difficult to wreck? No, but that's not the point. The point is that the views that are easy to wreck, for those of you listening going, oh, it's just such a waste of time, just keep in mind the views that are easy to wreck are prominent. There's more. They exist more. It's like mosquitoes. It's like saying, why are you swatting that mosquito? It's just a mosquito. Well, no, because there's thousands of them around my head. That's why we swatted them.
Yeah. Jim Bob, stick around with me for a few minutes after this,
Sure.
but we'll wrap it up for now. I really appreciate you coming on, dude. I know it's been an hour and a half now, so I've gobbled up a lot of your time. But
Sure.
Thanks for coming on, dude. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was a fun conversation. You can find me at Made by Jim Bob at YouTube. I do almost daily live streams that just go in all sorts of fun directions, all sorts of fun animations and different things that I use at Made by Jim Bob at YouTube. My Instagram account, which is primarily comics, is Made by Jim Bob as well. And anything else I'm on, I think Twitter is at Jim Bob. And then all the other accounts, you could just keep searching Made by Jim Bob. Also, if you want more information on what I do, you can go to madebyjimbob.com. So Made by Jim Bob across the board is where you can find me.
Everything will be linked below all of the platforms. So cheers, Jim Bob.
Thanks, man.